I never imagined a single laugh could change the way I saw myself, but that day it did. It was sharp, loud, and designed to cut right through my confidence. I was standing in the conference room presenting the project I had worked on for weeks, when a my coworker who treated sarcasm like oxygen leaned back in his chair and laughed at something I said, not because it was funny, but because mocking someone gave him a sense of power. His laugh echoed across the room, and soon others joined in without even knowing why. I felt the heat spread across my face, but I forced my voice to remain steady. I continued speaking, even though every word tasted bitter. When the meeting finally ended, I walked out with shaky hands and a heart filled with something I had never felt before. Not anger, not sadness, but a deep, focused determination. I had been quiet most of my life, the type who stayed out of drama and avoided unnecessary conflict. But that day, something inside me shifted. I realized silence can be strength, until someone mistakes it for weakness. And Adil had done exactly that. While the rest of the office returned to their routines, I made a decision. If he enjoyed humiliating me in front of others, then I would give him an experience he wouldn't forget. Not through shouting, and not through petty revenge. I wanted something cleaner, smarter, and far more effective. So I stayed quiet, pretending to ignore the mockery, while inside me, a plan quietly began taking shape. One that would turn the office's favorite comedian into the center of a twist no one saw coming. That laugh was the beginning, but it definitely wasn't the end. In the days that followed, I watched Adil with a level of attention I had never given anyone before. While he continued throwing cheap jokes my way, I refused to react. Not a smile, not a shrug, nothing. Silence irritates loud people, and each passing day made him more restless. He tried harder, adding dramatic gestures, louder comments, and exaggerated expressions to pull a response out of me. But the more he pushed, the calmer I became. And that calmness wasn't fake. It was strategic. Because while he thought I was ignoring him, I was observing him, watching the cracks beneath his confident mask. It didn't take long before I noticed something strange. His own work started slipping. Small errors in his reports, careless mistakes in his presentations, delays he didn't usually make. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence. But then I overheard two coworkers whispering about how he had messed up an important task twice. That's when I realized the truth. The loud jokes, the cocky confidence, the dramatic persona, everything was a performance hiding something fragile underneath. Adil wasn't strong. He was insecure. He survived on attention the way a fire survives on oxygen, and without it, he started flickering. Meanwhile, I focused on myself quietly. I improved my communication skills, practiced my presentation tone at night, and started helping coworkers without drawing any attention. Slowly, people began noticing me, not the silent guy in the corner, but someone reliable. And just when I thought things were settling, HR announced that a major client presentation was coming up, and the company would choose one employee to lead it. The entire office buzzed with excitement. Everyone prepared. Everyone except Adil. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't arrogance, fear. A few days before the selection meeting, something happened that completely shifted the direction of the story. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing some updates, when I felt a shadow stop beside me. I looked up. There he was, Adil. The same man who mocked me every chance he got now looked nervous, even hesitant. "Hey, Ion," he began, scratching his head awkwardly. "I heard you're good with client briefs. Mind checking something for me?" I didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at him. His voice lacked its usual loudness. His posture lacked its usual confidence. He placed a file on my desk, and before I could respond, he added, "It's just a small thing. You know how it is." That line was classic Adil, pretending he didn't care while clearly needing help. I opened the file and read through it. It didn't take long to see the problem. His draft was a mess, weak arguments, confusing structure, and missing details all over the place. This wasn't someone who needed fine-tuning. This was someone drowning quietly. He stood beside me waiting, trying to act casual, but the tapping of his foot betrayed his anxiety. Something inside me shifted. I understood him better in that moment than ever before. He mocked others because he was terrified of being exposed himself. In this presentation, it threatened to expose him completely. I made a decision not out of kindness, but out of strategy. I helped him. Not fully, but enough to keep him afloat. When I handed the edited version back, he gave a small, awkward smile. "Thanks, bro." Seriously, simply nodded. No emotion. No warmth. And that disturbed him more than anything else. He sensed the shift but couldn't understand it. The game had just begun. The next afternoon, I walked into the cafeteria, thinking I'd grab a quick lunch before returning to work. But the moment I stepped inside, the first thing I saw was Adil standing in the center, surrounded by a group of coworkers. And in his hand my work. Not his file. Mine. I recognized the structure instantly. The flow, the notes, the highlighted improvements. He was showing it off like it was his creation. "See this?" he said loudly, flipping through the pages with exaggerated confidence. "This is how a clean presentation looks. You gotta think smart if you want to impress big clients." They nodded, impressed. Some even asked him questions. He answered proudly, using my exact lines. Not one hint of guilt on his face. My chest tightened for a moment, not with anger, but with clarity. I should have expected this. A man who lives off stealing attention will eventually steal anything he thinks gives him more spotlight. Instead of confronting him, I walked out quietly. Because deep inside, I already understood something important. People who steal work never think ahead. They never imagine consequences. They only think about immediate praise, and that praise becomes their downfall. He had taken my structure, but not the core ideas, not the strategy, not the understanding behind each point. He had copied the shape, not the substance. And when the real test came, he would collapse under the weight of a plan he didn't truly understand. So instead of feeling betrayed, I felt something unexpected. Opportunity. His betrayal wasn't an obstacle. It was the doorway to the twist he would never see coming. Because the moment he presented stolen work, the truth would burn brighter than any joke he had ever thrown at me. I didn't go home that evening with anger. I went home with clarity. Adil thought he had gained the upper hand. He believed showing my work as his own made him smart. But the difference between him and me was simple. I knew how to play the long game. He only played for the moment. That night, I crafted a brand new presentation from scratch. Something far more powerful, clear, and impressive than the draft he had stolen. I reshaped my ideas, added deeper insights, and built a narrative that flowed naturally from start to end. But I did something even more intentional. I added a unique structure that required deep understanding. Anyone who didn't know the logic behind it would stumble, and stumble badly. Meanwhile, at work, I continued acting normal. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell anyone what he had done. I didn't even change my expression when he smirked at me from across the room. That was the beauty of silence. It made him think he had one. A person who thinks he has already won becomes blind to danger. And that blindness was exactly what I needed. I spent the rest of the week refining my delivery. I practiced eye contact, pauses, transitions, the tone of my voice. I knew that if I wanted the twist to land perfectly, I needed to show a version of myself no one had seen before. A confident, composed speaker, the opposite of the quiet guy he ridiculed. And when HR announced the shortlist for the presenter, both of our names were on it. The moment of truth was approaching. And Adil didn't know he was walking into a room carrying a ticking time bomb, one he'd built with his own hands. The conference room was packed the day of the final selection. Senior managers, team leads, and HR all sat ready to evaluate the two of us. Adil walked in wearing his usual confident smirk, adjusting his sleeves like a hero entering battle. I walked in quietly, calm, focused. He volunteered to go first, probably thinking he would set the bar high. The lights dimmed, his slides appeared, and he began speaking. Within 30 seconds, the problem started. He stuttered. He mixed up the flow. He reached a point that depended on understanding the logic behind the structure logic. He didn't know because he didn't create it. His voice shook. Sweat gathered on his forehead. The audience looked confused, shifting in their seats. At one point, he repeated a line twice, trying to buy time. His confidence collapsed slowly, painfully, and in front of the same people he once entertained with mockery. By the end, the room stayed silent, not impressed, not amused, just awkwardly silent. He stepped aside, face pale, fake smile trembling. Then it was my turn. I stood up and felt something steady inside me control. My new presentation looked clean, sharp, alive. I began with a strong opening line, then moved through each slide with clarity. I didn't rush. I didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. Every example, every transition, every idea flowed naturally. And because I genuinely understood the content, it felt effortless. People nodded. Managers leaned forward. HR took notes quickly. When I finished, the room filled with the kind of applause I had never heard before, loud, genuine, encouraging. I didn't look at a deal, but I felt his eyes on me. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet one. I was the one who set the bar. After the presentations, the atmosphere in the office shifted. People spoke about my clarity and confidence, praising how naturally everything flowed. The managers who barely noticed me before asked questions about my methods and ideas. For the first time, I wasn't invisible, but a deal. He sat in the corner, silent, the weight of failure pressing down on him. No one mocked him the way he mocked others. No one laughed at his humiliation. Instead, they avoided looking at him, unsure how to treat a man who had crumbled so visibly. Later that afternoon, HR called him in for a short meeting. He came out looking shaken. Apparently, they asked how he prepared, why the structure seemed copied, and why he couldn't explain basic parts of it. His answers didn't convince anyone. When HR called me next, I simply explained my own work and preparation. I didn't accuse him of stealing. I didn't mention his betrayal. I didn't have to. The comparison between us spoke louder than any accusation ever could. Over the next few days, people naturally distanced themselves from him. His jokes no longer landed. His sarcasm sounded forced. The mockery that once made people laugh now made them uncomfortable. Without attention, he seemed smaller, quieter, almost invisible. The same silence he once hated from me now surrounded him. And it wasn't revenge that caused it was truth. His downfall wasn't dramatic or loud. It was slow, quiet, and inevitable. A person who relies on humiliation to gain confidence loses everything the moment his own weaknesses are exposed. And Adil had finally faced himself. A week later, the final results were announced. I was officially chosen to lead the client presentation. It felt surreal. Not because I won, but because I had earned it fair and square without shortcuts, without deceit, without stepping on anyone. When I walked out of the meeting room, I saw Adil waiting near the hallway. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me with a mixture of regret and embarrassment. Then, in a voice far smaller than his usual tone, he said, "I'm sorry." The words were quiet, shaky, honest. For a second, I thought about all the times he mocked me. All the laughs at my expense. All the moments he tried to make me feel small. But strangely, I didn't feel anger. His downfall had already taught him what he needed to learn. "We all make mistakes," I replied simply. "Just don't repeat this one." He nodded, unable to look me in the eyes, and walked away. From that day on, I noticed a significant change in his behavior. He didn't mock anyone anymore. He spoke less, listened more, and tried to fix his work without shortcuts. And I continued focusing on my growth. The twist wasn't that he it was that he changed. The office slowly shifted to, people treated me with more respect, included me in discussions, and valued my voice. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. But the real twist wasn't about winning a presentation or defeating someone who wronged me. The real twist was discovering that revenge doesn't always require destroying someone. Sometimes exposing the truth is enough. And sometimes, that truth becomes the very thing that turns a mocker into a better man. When I look back at everything that happened, one lesson stands out more than anything else. Silence is not weakness. People often believe that the loudest voice wins, that confidence comes from volume, and that strength is measured by how boldly someone speaks. But confidence is quiet, strength is calm, and truth needs no noise. Adil mocked others because it distracted people from seeing his flaws. He weaponized humor because he feared vulnerability, and he underestimated me because he mistook silence for fear. But silence gave me clarity. It helped me see beyond the surface, understand his patterns, and choose a strategy that didn't involve confrontation. It allowed me to rise without pulling anyone down. And when the moment came, truth exposed him far more effectively than anger ever could. This story isn't about humiliating a bully. It's about understanding that people who hurt others often hide the deepest insecurities. It's about realizing that reacting emotionally gives them power, but responding thoughtfully takes that power away. If someone underestimates you, let them. If someone mocks you, let their laughter echo. Because when the time comes, your growth will be louder than their jokes. And when truth finally steps into the light, every lie, every pretended confidence, and every stolen moment collapses on its own. My silence didn't break Adil. His own actions did. My success didn't embarrass him. His choices did. And in the end, revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about transformation. Not just his, but mine too. I didn't become louder. I became stronger. I didn't change to please anyone. I grew to become the version of myself I always knew I could be. And that is the real victory.